Hello, I am Leslie from Montana. Today I am traveling to Alabama. So I'm going to be talking to Bambi Lynn. How
Hi,
you doing, Bambi?
I'm doing great. I'm very excited about this beautiful weather. We finally have some nice weather, and hopefully the rain will hold off for a little bit.
I'm not going to call you a doll maker because I feel like you are a creator of characters that come from a magical land. I would like for you to explain how you discovered this land and how your characters ended up on your back door.
I actually started out as a writer. I write romance novels, primarily set in the Middle Ages for the most part. But one of the series that I work on is paranormal, which means it has elements of the mystic or mythology or magic. Vampires kind of fall into that category. Anything that's not of the norm. One of the things that I focused on was an ancient Celtic goddess of the Ardennes forest. Her name is Ardwina. I made her a character actually in one of my books. She became so prominent that she just continued on throughout all of the whole series. One of the things that she went through was a little battle between the fairy queen for territory. And as they called a truce, the fairy queen kind of gave her a little troop of fairies to serve her. But instead, they really just cause trouble. And they're just like little insects buzzing around in her head. They just cause her all kinds of annoyances. And they're one of the main conflicts throughout almost all my series. If there's a problem, you can bet that the fairies probably caused it, trying to do good, but just messing everything up. A few years ago, before COVID, we used to have big events. We had luncheon, readers would come and we would give away things. We would make baskets that were themed after our worlds we had created or characters or particular books we had coming out that year. And I was looking for a way, something that I could make that I could use to market my books. I'll make fairy doors and fairy houses. That doesn't seem like it would be too hard to do. I started looking around for ways to make fairy doors, different things to make them out of, and I discovered polymer clay. I started making these fairy doors and I started recycling jars and making fairy houses. I think I'm going to try to make a dragon because, dragons are great. Everybody loves Dungeons and Dragons. I'm a medieval fantasy kind of person, so I love Ren fairs. I really wanted to be a vendor at a Renaissance fair, so I thought, well, it'd be great to have some dragon stuff. I'm going to have to show you one here. This is one of my favorite. When I was working on those, then I also kind of started adding a new character into some of my books. These were characters that lived in the forest, that kind of protected the forest. They reclaimed abandoned places, and I called these characters turfs. I started looking at ways to make these characters. That's when I discovered art dolls. Oh my gosh, since then I just love making these dolls because everyone is different. Everything I make, everything is a little bit different. I can make 10 fairy doors, they're not going to be the same. 10 dragons, they're not going to be the same. But these really, really come to life and have a personality. When I get started with their face, I just start out with a ball and start decorating around it. And then to see their little faces come to life and become who they actually are, it's just fascinating for me. And I just love making those. When I retired from my day job, which was teaching, I had decided about a year before retiring that I wanted to open a studio. The timing worked out really well. So I was able to open my studio. Now I have this magical world where I can sell all of the things, including all of my books, and talk all day long about the world that I built and all the characters who live there. I'm located in Huntsville, Alabama. It's really an up and coming city. When I moved here, it was just kind of a lazy southern town, but now it's really starting to just grow exponentially. They make rockets here. This is the subtitle is the Rocket City. Space Camp is here. There's a lot going on, and it's still really nice and still kind of as big a city as it is. It's very hometown.
Since you mentioned the COVID, how do you feel with having your shop? Are you feeling like the traffic is slowly coming back to it now?
I was in the midst of maybe 3 years before the end of my teaching career when COVID hit. We went home for spring break. That was in 2020, and we didn't go back to school that year. And then the following year, teachers went back, but students were remote. Some artists who just got their studio, they weren't open for customers. the artists could come and work, because there are a lot of artists who aren't interested in selling. They just need a place that's separate from their home or wherever they live, that they can come away from family obligations and have quiet and work on their art. And there are other people who this is the only thing that they do to make a living. So there's a wide range of purposes. For some of those people, it didn't affect them at all. But for the people who had just started, who kind of needed to make some money, it was very, very difficult. When I moved in July of 2022, one of my fellow artists was telling me that that was the first month that she had made any money, because they hadn't had customers. They hadn't been allowed to have customers. I was a vendor at some Renaissance fairs. I did that a lot before COVID. During COVID, nothing. I just wrote. I kind of worked on my online presence. So I have my own website. I certainly have a page on Etsy to sell my stuff. I started doing pretty well. Stuck at home. It gave me a lot of opportunity to really kind of set that up and get that going and kind of establish myself there. Once COVID was starting to calm down and people were starting to get out a little bit more, they started having the markets again here. This I have so many people who come in, they don't know how to pronounce Arduino. First of all, that's the first conversation we have to have. And then they want to know if I'm Arduino, which I have to explain then who she is and that kind of thing. So I thought, I think I'm going to write just a little pamphlet. I mean, I'm a writer after all. To come up with a story of who she was, how the Roman gods, when the Romans invaded up that far up into France and Belgium, brought their gods with them and they kind of pushed them out. It's a fun story. And then I thought, I could do the same thing with my dolls. I've given them all names. Thanks to the International Art Doll Registry, I have certificates of authenticity. They're numbered. So I thought, I could write a little pamphlet to go with each doll, birth certificate to give to people with their name on it when they were born. So yeah, so I've been thinking about doing just that very thing and printing up some little pamphlets to go with each doll.
I tell people their personalities come through that I cannot not tell you about them because
Yes.
otherwise they won't shut up.
We know so much about them. And, I don't think it's just dolls. I think a lot of creators are like that when they have specific pieces that they make. They all have a story and a background and inspiration. As artists, I don't care what kind of artists we are, we're all storytellers of some kind, and where we got the idea, what our influences are.
Sounds like you're still relatively new with the doll making part.
I only really started working with this clay about 6 years ago. I did make some jewelry, but jewelry didn't sell really well. That wasn't my thing. I wanted a fairy door hanging on a leather rope, and that nobody wanted to wear that. But it worked really well as a little Christmas tree ornament. Once I changed them from pendant to Christmas tree ornament, they went crazy for them. Marketing is so important.
It is. You got to realize that those are all still portals, dear.
So true. It's so true. I make little rings that look like fairy doors, and I tell every kid and adult that comes in here, you can totally disappear into that fairy door. It's like a magic ring. You just disappear right into it.
What age of kids did you teach?
I taught eighth grade, which is like 13-year-olds. One foot in the door of home, but the other foot's ready to say, no, I don't necessarily believe everything I learned at home. So many people who come in, when they find out I was a teacher, they just assumed I was an art teacher. But I wasn't. I was a history teacher. I taught from the Stone Age all the way up through the Middle Ages. There was a lot of things I wanted so bad to talk to them about, stories and mythology and just so many things like that I couldn't talk to them about. But now they come in and we get to talk about it. I'm only open Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And on Saturdays, I dress up in some kind of medieval thing, which almost always involves a corset and lots of cleavage. I have the very fancy one and I also have the peasant one, but you can bet there's a corset involved.
Did you actually paint their eyes as well?
Yes, I do. First of all, let me just say I'm a YouTube junkie. Just about everything that has to do with artwork, I've learned from YouTube. Looked at different ways. I've bought eyes. I've made them with clay. I've got every kind of resin that is known to man, but I have never used resin because it's just like sometimes you just have like a block. I mean, in the long run, so what? I mess it up, throw it in the trash. I've wasted $15. One of the ladies I discovered that I love to watch, she's a doll maker. She just uses clear cabochons. She makes a little black dot right in the middle, or I make them in longer, an oblong shape if I'm making dragon eyes. And then she just paints over that with some kind of color shifting metallic paint. Like for this, that's a big cabochon. But like for
Mhm.
my dolls, I use a smaller one. But like for these, so I'll use like maybe 6 or 7 different shades of paint, scrape parts of it away and kind of blend it, let it dry a little bit, add a new coat. For those, I use actually nail polish. You can't use nail polish on polymer clay, it gets all sticky and eventually starts eating away at the clay. So you don't ever want to really varnish any of your polymer clay pieces with like clear nail polish or use some kind of glittery nail polish. You don't want to do that. It works great for these cabochons. And so I can use them for my doll eyes. His eyes, they're blue. I painted a little black dot right in the middle. And then I painted around the outside. I painted over the whole back of the cabochon then with this metallic blue. The paint I use is Lumiere. It's one of my favorite metallic kind of paints. But any
Mm.
kind of a metallic acrylic paint, you can mix glitter in there. You can even just use like a clear varnish and mix chalk pastel in it to get a color you want, or if you want to get just like blends of colors. I love to use color shift because it kind of gives it a little bit more depth. So it look like the eyes are kind of following you when you turn the doll a little bit.
You also sew their clothes too, because they're not polymer.
That's correct. So I use clay to make their head, their face, and stuff like their ears. I make their hands, feet, or shoes. I kind of started leaning towards shoes, save the face for later because it's almost like you could just make faces all the time. Like, oh, this is cute. Let me make another one. And you don't want to take the time. And so I do. I think I'm going to try to start doing hands and feet first, then doing the face after. I put those then on a wire armature. I pad it with quilt batting, which I just cut into small strips. And then you just wrap each limb and then the torso. Then my favorite thing to cover that with is cheesecloth. So I use cheesecloth. It's cheap as dirt. You can buy it anywhere at the dollar store, at the grocery store, at Walmart, at Lowe's. It's easy, easy to dye. You can dye any color that you want. So whatever color scheme you kind of have going on for that particular doll, it makes a great base for covering up the quilt batting for then layering on the clothes. One of the things I found that really adds to it is the more layers you can have on these clothes, it just adds so much character and personality to the doll when you start really thinking about those accessories. My first dolls, I didn't have too many accessories. I really just kind of focused on that, and my clothes making skills were atrocious. So I had to really practice those kinds of things. I would probably have to make 20 or 25 more dolls before I feel like I get one that I'm like, wow, this one's really, really good. But I think even then, still, you'll be like, okay, on that next one now,
Yep.
you know, every time, it doesn't matter if you made $100. On the next one, you're going to fix all the mistakes you made on those first $100.
Because you're going to also be joining us on our doll gathering meetings.
Yes, I
Good.
hope so. When I retired, I thought, oh, I'm going to have all this free time. I'm just going to be a lady of leisure. I'm going to sleep till 10 o'clock, and then I'm going to get up and sculpt a little bit, write a little bit, and then have wine by 4 o'clock. So my brain's working on overtime. And as always, I still don't have enough time for all the projects that I want to do.
Where are you looking? Because you're still really in your growing stage with it.
First of all, I want to encourage everybody to get an online presence. Whatever you do, if you just want to have a shop on Etsy and maybe a site on eBay, Amazon has a whole creators section now where you can sell. I think it's called Amazon Handmade. You can sell your stuff there. I really encourage people to do that because most of us have to have a day job to support our art. Focus yourself there. Let me tell you about my shop where I am. Place is called Low Mill. Way back in the day, cotton was the number one industry here. This was in the early 1900s. So the first cotton mills in the country were built right here in North Alabama in this area. Low Mill is a factory, an old cotton mill that was owned by the Low family here in Huntsville. So then time went on, the mill closed down, and eventually somebody else bought it, used it during the Vietnam War to make army boots. There are pictures all over the place of, women sitting at the sewing machines doing the cotton stuff. And then there's other pictures of women sitting at machines making military, combat boots and things like that. So it's just really cool. And the atmosphere is neat. There are several architectural features that we can't mess with, beautiful wood floors, brick buildings. I'm going to kind of spin my laptop around here a smidgen, just so maybe you can kind of see. But those windows, that's my side window. I have a corner, so I'm kind of lucky in that. And then we have these big, big windows that go all the way up, and it's just very industrial. The atmosphere is just fun and nice. Several years ago, back in the 70s, I believe, somebody bought it and decided to kind of divide it up into these little studios for these artists. It's very eclectic, lots of different kinds of people. When you search for, top things to do in Huntsville, this is one of like the top 5 things. So it's really nice to get a lot of people in through looking for art in particular, and people who aren't afraid to pay for art. It's just also kind of nice because, if you make stuff, and you put your time and everything into it, and then you have somebody come by and look at it and go, $20 for something that took you 4 days to make.
Tell me a little bit more about yourself.
But I grew up in Georgia in a very, very small farm town. I didn't fit in. I was a farmer's daughter, but I didn't feel like the farmer's daughter. I wanted to go live in a big high rise in New York City. Of course, the first opportunity I got, I left town, moved to the big city just 20 miles down the road. But while I was there making plans for my future, I met my husband, who was a soldier at the time. He was moving out pretty quickly to go overseas to Belgium. I tagged along. 15 years later, we were still living in Belgium. Developed my love of medieval stuff and castles. It's just so rich over there. I was going to college and writing my first novel at the same time. I actually lived not too far from the Ardennes forest, which is where the goddess Arduina, she was the patron goddess of that area. There was a ruins of a medieval castle that it wasn't a tourist place or anything, it was just ruins. And so I could just go down there with, this was before laptops, so I could just go down there with my yellow legal pad there in the courtyard and write my book. My first book that I wrote was set there in that castle. So that was the place that was kind of near and dear to my heart. We were there for a little while. Not too long after that, my husband actually got out of the military, but continued to work for the government. We had a child, and he was growing up there. He was about 5 years old. He could only speak French. It was just kind of time to come back. We actually moved back to the DC area. I lived in a suburb of the DC area for about 10 years. The unit that my husband worked for was relocating here to Huntsville. At first, I was not excited because, I grew up in the South and I didn't really fit in the South. I wasn't excited about coming back to live in the South. I had a son who was just getting ready to go to high school. I wasn't too excited about him growing up in the South. I just wasn't really happy about it. But my husband's like, no, you'll like Huntsville. It's not like other places. So I said, we'll give it a try. Sure enough, I do. I love it here. And the people of Alabama are just the nicest, most sincerely kind people that you will ever meet in your life. After I taught elementary school, I taught middle school, 8th grade, mainly because I wanted to teach that particular class that had that little section of medieval history. I was very excited to retire, but I never really wanted to do that. I always wanted to work with kids. My teacher mentality, I don't think will ever go away. I get up at this time and I have this amount of time to do this. And then from here to here, I do this. I have it all blocked out.
Have availability for you to be able to go into your own space for when you need that inspiration for your dolls. If you're surrounded by the woodland, I'm sure they're hanging out there.
That's what we did. We bought what used to be a cotton field. There was nothing there, not a tree or anything, and built our dream house. Now we have trees because we've planted a bunch of stuff. There was right on the edge between our house and our neighbor's property is a little grove of trees. It's the perfect little magical little thing. I mean, it's 150 yards by 50 yards, right? So not very big. I thought this would make a perfect little fairy forest. It has little magical spots here and there. I did convince him though to buy me just a plain old shed from Lowe's, and that's going to be my project house. I'm going to turn this house into the fairy house of your dreams. It's going to be like when you enter the fairy forest and you come upon this little house and you don't know if you should go in and eat the cookies or if you should run away. It's going to be that kind of house. Very excited about that.
Oh, you're definitely going to document the process.
On my YouTube channel, I do mostly tutorials on how to make things with polymer clay. I do book trailers for my books when I have a new book coming out. I have already started documenting. So when they were building the fairy house, I just got it for Christmas about 2 weeks ago. I got electricity. So I have a checklist of what I have to get first. Next thing is walls.
Any kind of inspiration that you would leave with somebody?
Don't expect to make a living right away, but don't let that stop you either. And don't let other people discourage you. Listen to your own head. That's what I used to tell my students all the time.
You realize that the artist is the one that's going to save the world because we think outside the box.
The one with all the great creative ideas.
You have been a delight to talk to,
Yeah,
Bambi.
you too. I'm so excited to talk to you.
And we will talk again soon.